For many of you in this class, this might be your first time using Google Colab, which is totally fine. For others, especially if you've taken my previous classes, you probably already know this material, in which case you could probably skip this video. There's some minor updates based on like literally the newest GUI of 2023, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same as it was for the past couple years. So what exactly is Colab? Colab is this tool from Google that allows you to use essentially their GPUs, and we'll talk a little bit more about GPUs as we get into them, but essentially allows you to run some pretty high-powered machinery, computers, for a fairly low cost. I'm not going to say it's cheap, but it's fairly low cost. They're based on what's called Jupyter Notebooks, and Jupyter Notebooks have been around for probably a decade now. They're pretty big in the data science community, and they've sort of slowly made their way into the machine learning community. Now, obviously, not everything we're going to do today is machine learning based, but I actually find, and we'll talk about why in a minute, like for this particular class, like stuff like this is going to be really helpful because I'll be able to add notes and other things to it. I don't know why I said this is free. This is not free anymore. It used to be free. There's now a bunch of paid stuff. We'll look at that in a minute. So what is Colab? So Colab is the combination of both text and code. So you can kind of imagine it as like a Google Doc, but it also allows you to run code directly in it and attach a computer to it, which means I can add notes so you can sort of understand what we're doing. You can look at the file from 6 months from now and like maybe get some reminders on how it works, that sort of thing. It also includes a bunch of dependencies, which means I don't need to go through all the hassle of us installing a ton of code on our computers or on other GPUs. So it saves me a lot of time. It saves you a lot of time. For the cost, it's going to be like very, very helpful for this class. They're also all web files, so really like Google Docs. That I can share them with you. I can edit them. I can reshare them with you. You can make a copy of yours and make your own notes. That sort of thing. So it's pretty nice in that regard, as it's very easy to share. Whereas in other coding classes, like I would have to save stuff to GitHub or like other things, and most of you probably don't want to deal with that. So this is just a much easier way to access these files and begin to play with them and use the code that's there. Now the downside is there are time limits to this. We'll talk about this in a minute. Based on how much you pay, there is a time limit, but also there's just in general a time limit for how long you can run one of these at one time. So when we look at doing this with video, you might want to run this on 100 videos all at once, and you'll find that very likely you can't run all that code on 100 video files, individual clips, that sort of thing, in less than 24 hours, which means you might run into issues with Colab. So we'll talk about that as we get deeper into the class, but just be aware there are some time limits. There are some GPU and CPU limits, although I would honestly say this is not the issue anymore with Colab. You now have access to really like basically the newest GPUs on Colab, which are very expensive, and for this class probably not super necessary, but if you want to do something in a really short period of time, they're really powerful. And the last thing I will say is this is a Google company. We don't really know what they do with our data when we share it there. I really don't think they're going to care about any of the film data that we're sharing here, but if you are very privacy conscious, I might recommend like setting up a dummy Google account so you can have your own Colab account, your own Drive account, and only share stuff from this class there. Again, I don't think it's really the end of the world. I think most of us probably have Google accounts these days, and we just bear with the annoyance of them. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what each of these plans are. So there are two plans I'm going to recommend you purchase. One is Colab Pro. It is $10 a month, and it's available in probably most of the countries that we're talking about today. If you, for whatever reason, don't have access to it, let me know. There's usually ways to get around that. And with $10 a month, you get what's called 100 credits. And I'll talk about what credits are in a minute. You can always buy more credits, so it really doesn't matter. Like, it kind of like the price is what it is, and you just pay per credit. There is also another plan that is Colab Pro Plus, and that is $50 a month, and that is $500. I want to call it $500, but it's 500 credits. And the other nice thing that's here is that this allows you to do background execution. So you can actually shut the file off or like close your tab, and the thing will still execute behind the scenes, or you can close your laptop and execute stuff behind the scenes. What I would basically say is if you think you're not going to play with this too much, like maybe just go through the exercises in class and maybe do it on a couple of short video clips, then Colab Pro is probably enough for you. If you know that you want to play with this a lot and you've got ideas for a big project you want to work on, then Pro Plus is definitely going to be the way to go. And that's mostly because it's background execution. You can always upgrade or downgrade, and Colab will like prorate that upgrade downgrade. So let's say you start you're like, I have big plans, and you start paying $50 a month, and then halfway through class, you're like, honestly, I'm not using it that much. Maybe I won't really need the $50. You can downgrade to 10, and it's fairly easy. It's all done through the Colab interface. So maybe start at Pro and see how much you use it. You can also buy credits individually. I think they might be a little bit more expensive when you buy them, but even then, it's like dollars at most that you're overspending. So for anyone unsure of what they're going to be doing this for the next class, like maybe Colab Pro is plenty. So credits. This gets very complicated depending on what GPU you're using, what CPU you're using, whether you're using high RAM, low RAM, whatever. Mostly what we're probably going to use within this class are probably the CPU, which is what we're going to use when we don't use a GPU at all. And then I think we can mostly get away with TPU and V100s. I don't think for anything we're really doing in this class we need an A100. If you really are like, pushy and you must have stuff done quickly, maybe an A100 is worth it. So these prices are how many credits you spend per hour. Now it is prorated down to like the minute or second. So if you only spend like 45 minutes, it doesn't like round up. It's just per minute or per second even, the amount of credits. And the first number is what we use with the regular RAM, and the other is with high RAM. Again, high RAM might be required for some tools, but I can't think of anything we're going to do in this class where it's like must have. And then actually the A100s automatically come with high RAM, so there is no high RAM price for that. And you'll see it's like very, very little amount of credit difference. So in some cases, high RAM might be faster, so maybe we want to leave it on. I don't know. I've never really gone that deep to like figure out exactly which one needs which. But you'll see here, like CPU, to go through 100 credits per hour, you would need to use the CPU quite a lot. And for this week, we're only going to use the CPU, so there'll be little to no cost. T4s, which are the slowest and oldest GPUs, you don't go through many credits per hour. Again, you would need to spend, what would that be, 50 hours to meet your $100 credit limit, which I don't think we're going to do unless we've got a lot of material to go through. A100s, you can burn through 100 credits very quickly, 10 hours, 9 hours, whatever, and you'll burn through 100 credits. So again, as I go through the tutorials, I'll tell you what GPU you might want to use for this, but in most cases, you're going to be fine getting away with CPU and T4s. All right, so let's dig in a little bit more about why Colab is special and why we're going to use it for this class. So as I mentioned, Colab is a terminal, which is sort of the command line GUI thing that you see hackers use in movies. If you're not a programmer, that's sort of what we use here. A code editor, meaning you can write code and you edit it, and then a place for notes. And the other thing that's also maybe not even mentioned here is also this idea that there is a GUI aspect to writing code. So I'll cover that in just a second, but this will be very helpful for those of us that are into code and want to dig in and look at the code, but then also for people that don't want to look at the code, we can kind of hide it for you. And the last thing is, it gives us a GPU. So with machine learning tools, GPUs are almost a must. And that's because the way that machine learning works is it breaks stuff up into very, very little bits and pieces. And it turns out that a GPU, which you might use more for like gaming or high visual rendering and like architecture or video, turns out that works really well for GPUs to process all that little data. Now, some of you might say, I have a GPU at home. Can I run all this stuff locally? You can. I probably wouldn't recommend it because, well, one, if you don't know how to put all this code locally, like it's not worth me trying to explain that in this class. If you're a programmer and you know how to do this, you can certainly try to get without using Colab, but I might recommend it just for the drive integration and other stuff. If you are really like, hey, I really can't spend $10 a month, and I have a local GPU, can you show me how to do stuff locally? Like, let me know. I can probably try to figure it out for you. But in general, it's kind of annoying. And in most cases, you actually need either a Linux machine or a Windows machine. And in many cases, you need actually just a Linux machine. So for many of you, this probably just isn't possible, which is, again, why I tend to recommend Colab for my classes. We don't need to get into this too much, but essentially what this allows you to do is, for those of you that have done programming or written Python scripts before, this allows you to execute a script directly from what we call a cell, and we'll look at those in a minute. But this, usually the path to this would have to be you'd have to write some code in a code editor, save it as a file, and then you'd have to go over to terminal and say, run this command using Python, or run this script using Python. For Colab, we have what are called cells. And you can dump all of your code that's up here into a single cell and just run it, and it works sort of slightly easier than this. It's not really ideal because of how variables and other things work. A better way to do this is actually to break stuff up into individual cells and also label them, right? So like, say we want to have some variables that we want to set, like height and width. Well, here you can actually set a single cell that sets individual variables. And then you can write some code, like some text to remind you, like, hey, this is what this does. And then what you can even do is you can run this cell, like work on it a little bit, and you can even go back and change variables. So you don't have to go in and individual, like, edit lines of code. You can sort of edit individual cells, which is a little bit cleaner for everything. So it makes everything a little bit easier to run. And the other thing that's kind of nice is that you can even run command line or bash scripts directly from these cells. So these cells are also a mix of Python and bash, which maybe you don't know what that means and it doesn't matter to you. But those of you that do know what that means, you know that's kind of unique and interesting, and it actually becomes very, very helpful, especially in machine learning, because we often are doing a lot of stuff in bash, but then also writing little stuff in Python, and to be able to do both in the same file is very helpful. So in this case, you'll see we're installing some dependencies using a thing called pip, and then we're writing everything else in Python inside the notebook. So one thing I will note is maybe after you leave this class, you might come across other Colab notebooks, and you might find people write things in different ways. Like the way I'm going to structure my Colab notebooks is more for teaching, but there are other people who run them more for production or run them more as programmers, and therefore you might see different things. So for example, as I mentioned, there is a way to make these sort of like lightweight GUIs by running some additional commands inside of Colab. So you'll see this like comment here that says @param type string, and that actually creates a little GUI that is a text field. So we will use this a lot in class because I know for many of us, we are not programmers. So I am going to obfuscate a lot of the code away so that all you have to do is set little GUI items. So you'll set paths, you'll set some variables and some options, and I'll explain all of that for you. And then for those of you that are interested in the code is always accessible behind the scenes of these GUIs. So you can always dig in and ask me questions about that. So in some cases, I have written code that is more like this. You won't really see a lot of that in this class because this class is really meant for people who are not programmers. So we probably won't be encountering a lot of this stuff where variables are inside of cells. We'll see it more as GUIs. But you may come across other Colab notebooks of mine or other things where this is all set in the Python cell. So just be aware of that. Again, I'm always happy to help if you come across an old notebook of mine and you're like, hey, how does this work? I'm happy to point that out for you. Okay, so at this point, let's just take a quick walkthrough of what Colab looks like. And literally, like as I was recording this today, I noticed that there's a slight change in some of the GUI, which I think is actually helpful. It's actually an improvement over what was there previously. So let's go ahead and just take a look at how this works. We'll open this basics file. And in this case, this happens to open up in GitHub. I'll probably be sharing direct links to Python notebooks or direct links to Colab notebooks. In this case, if you do happen to come on across in GitHub, you'll just see it says here open in Colab. You can just click this link, and that will open this up in Colab. Now, I personally have a couple different Colab accounts. If you have multiple Google accounts, you'll probably also want to make sure that you're paying for Colab on the same account that you have the largest drive space on, or you're paying for a drive space on the same account that you've subscribed to Colab from. Very confusing. Just know that if you have multiple Google accounts, make sure everything's being paid through one of the accounts. So in my case, I'm actually going to use my NYU account because I don't have to pay for Drive account space on there. Thank you, NYU. On my other ones, I have paid in the past as well. Just make sure you're opening this up in the correct Google account, and then you're going in and actually like subscribing to this. So I think the way to subscribe to this is actually to click on this here. Nope, that's not it. Okay, where do I go and subscribe? It's been a minute since I've done this because I've been subscribed for such a long time. Interesting. Okay, I know one of the places to find this, which is in View Resources, and you'll see here that there is a Learn More button. I hope that's not the only place to subscribe from. Maybe one of you can tell me if you found it in a better place, because I unfortunately am already subscribed. If you click to learn more, you'll see here that there are different subscription pricings. So there is Colab Pro, Colab Pro Plus. There is also Pay As You Go. The downside I would say here is Pay As You Go does not offer high RAM and does not offer the ability to access a terminal, which we might use in this class. But also you'll see here like the pricing is kind of the same. This is per unit, so if you don't think you're going to hit 100 units per month, then maybe this is better. But I'd also say, like, for this class, you will probably use 100 units per month since we were going to be doing new stuff every week. So I'd say at least sign up for Colab Pro here, and then maybe if you want to sign up for Pro Plus, then you can. It's kind of up to you, but I would say at least Pro is probably good for everyone. Okay, so that's sort of how you get access, I hope, to where you can find the how to subscribe. So that's in Connect, and then view resources, and then over here, learn more. I guess, my guess is that if you do not have a Colab Pro account, they're probably bugging you with a modal or something on the main screen when you first open it. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about how these notebooks, or like the GUI of this thing and how everything works. So when you first open this, it probably looks a little bit like this. You will see here what are called cells. So there is a text cell. Text cells just contain text, and they basically look like a Google Doc. Code cells have these these gray backgrounds, and they have a play button next to them. And when you hit play, that's actually going to run the code. Now, we are not connected yet to a machine. So in this case, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to come up to the top right here, and we're going to click connect. And in this case, it's going to connect us to a default machine, which is a regular CPU machine, which has no GPU attached to it. That's totally fine, but we want to just start here. So let's go ahead and hit connect. And now see it has a green check mark, and it says RAM and disk. Now, that means we're essentially connected, and now we can run a cell. So to run a cell, there are two ways to run a cell. Either to click inside the cell, so click inside the cell and hit shift return, or the play button. Now, I will likely just start hitting shift return because that's just how I'm used to running it. So at any point, if you're like, wait, did he run that cell or not? Hopefully I'll try to remember to hit play. But usually I will do shift return. Now, if you hit play, it's going to probably tell you in most cases that this notebook was authored by me, either my Gmail account or my NYU account. Maybe in some other case it'll say something else. Now, the thing to know about is this does ask for access to your Drive account or other things. So if you open up a random notebook, there are ways to have security issues with those notebooks. So in general, I would say, like, don't open a notebook I don't give you unless you know what you're doing. Go ahead and hit run anyway. And this just printed out this thing called you just ran a code cell. And that's because it's Python. And this is a Python print command that says print anything that is inside of these brackets here. This is not a coding class. Don't worry about like what this is, and if you don't understand this, that's totally fine. Everything else will be given to you in a way that you can understand and use easily without having to get too involved in it. I can run this again. Just hit the play button again, and you'll see when you click off of it that there's a little number inside that cell, and that's the order of how many times it's run. So this is run once and then twice, so it's actually 2, right, because it ran 2 times, and that's why there's a 2 there. Now if I go down here, I'm just going to set some variables, a variable named first underscore number and a variable named second underscore number. Again, don't worry if this doesn't mean anything to you. And I'm going to run this cell. And now if I click away, you'll see that's 3. Now if I go back up here and I click on this again, and I click away, you'll see it says 4. So this gives you the order of operations. Maybe when I'm talking through stuff, I might forget to say like, hey, I ran this cell, in which case you might just want to look to see if there's a green check mark next to anything. Now, for those of you that are programmers or have used code before and are interested in learning a little bit about the code of these things, this is, again, a print command that is going to spit out these variables. So it's going to say 12 plus 25 equals 37. So this just does some simple math and then runs a print command. Now, order of operations matters with these cells. Again, for our class, it probably won't be that big of a deal. But if I change the variables here, like let's just say I make this 45. If I don't run the cell, this number is not resaved. So if I don't run the cell, I'm not going to hit play, and I run this again, it's still going to say 12 plus 25 equals 37. But you're going to be like, but man, I said this is 45. Always double check by running this again and then run it. And you'll see now it says 12 plus 45 equals 57. Where it gets tricky is you can also set multiple variables. You can set a variable down here. There's also a second number, and now the number has changed to 12 plus 30 equals 42. So if I run this, I've now overridden this. It gets very confusing, so just make sure you keep track of the order. In most notebooks I'm going to give you, it is going to be run from the top to the bottom. If even that, most of the stuff we're going to run is just going to be like, here's a GUI cell, just run it. It's going to operate on you, and I'll explain why, that sort of thing. Lastly, setting a GPU is different than setting a CPU. By default, I believe many of our notebooks are going to just start using a CPU. If you do want to switch to GPU, or I tell you to switch to GPU, there are a couple different ways to do that. One is just to check to see if you're running a CPU. You'll see the top of my notebooks always run this command. And this will throw an error when you're just using a CPU. If you don't have a GPU, this will throw an error message. Now, if you want to set a GPU, what you'll do is you'll come up to runtime. And you go to change runtime type. And then here you will have options for CPU, A100, V100, T4, and a TPU. Like I said, in most cases, a T4 is going to be fine. Just know that when you run this, if you by accident run this in CPU mode, but it should have been run in GPU mode, you will lose anything not saved directly to your drive. Now, I'll talk about that when we actually get to it in class, because it is sort of easy to forget. And in this example, it might not make a lot of sense to you. But things that are saved directly into what's called the Colab environment, which I'll show you in a second, any files that are uploaded there or any files that are saved there are not saved when you delete your runtime. So in this case, it's saying delete the runtime, disconnect, and then reconnect to the new GPU. In most cases, we're going to work directly out of a folder that's saved into Drive, so everything will be fine there. But there may be cases where you upload stuff just to quickly process them, and then you forget to download them or move them, so it can happen. So just know that like this is sort of a temporary computer, and as soon as you delete your runtime, you'll delete anything that is not saved into your Drive folder. I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK here, and then I'm going to hit Save, and you'll see it basically restarts the notebook. And it's saying initializing, and it's saying connecting, and it's saying T4. Now if I run this cell again, you'll see that it gives me GPU Tesla T4. So as I mentioned, there are a handful of notebooks that are available to you. This is actually out of date. Refer to the slides that I've got there, and that's about it. Now there is also a way to connect to Google Drive. On the left-hand side here, you'll see these 4 icons. At the top here is table of contents. So I will try to structure our notebooks so that they have headings, and those headings then become jump links. So you can then jump to them and check out different parts of it. Now again, for this class, it's mostly going to be pretty straightforward. We won't be doing a lot of like long notebooks. I'll try to break them up into pieces instead. But in this case, you can sort of see that you can jump around between different sections. We probably don't need to use search, and we probably don't need to use this tool, which is the variables tool. 9 times out of 10, we're going to look at this folder, which is the files folder. And if I click on this, you'll see here I get basically a little file tree. And inside all of here is a thing called sample data, and then we've got this open area. Now, what we're going to mostly do in this class is actually just connect to our Google Drive, and then a folder in here is going to show up with our Drive account. It's kind of crazy that we'll see everything from our Drive now in Colab. It's kind of a really powerful tool here. So if we scroll down to the bottom of this page, you'll see this section called Google Drive Integration. This is a cell you will see pretty much in every one of my notebooks, and this allows us to connect to Google Drive. So we'll go ahead and hit play here. And it's going to say, are you sure you want to allow this notebook to access your Google Drive account? And we'll say yes, connect to Google Drive. And then you'll need to click on your Google Drive. I see already here, I am not in my NYU account. I am in my Gmail account. That's fine for this, because I'm actually going to work off of it. I'm going to click on this and say, yes, you want to allow all of these things. Again, this is where security becomes an issue. If I'm sharing the notebook with you, it means I've at least like done due diligence on it, and you can trust me. You're paying for the class, so I'm definitely not going to rip you off or anything. So hit allow, and then it's going to process a little bit. It's going to run its little circle here. And because I have a lot of files in my Drive account, this might take a little bit longer than it would for you. And now it's going to say mounted at /content/drive. So just know that this area here is called /content. That is the folder path. This is the content folder. Now you don't see Drive yet here, and that's a little bug that usually happens with these Colab notebooks. What you want to do is you want to come over here and hit this little refresh button. And now you see a folder called Drive. And if you click on this little arrow here, you'll see Drive, My Drive. And now here are all of the files, the thousands upon thousands of files that I have in my Google Drive account. And if you connect the same way and connect to your Drive, you will see your files here. Now, what we're going to do in this class is we're actually going to make a single folder that is called Algo Film, and we'll just work off of that folder in Drive the entire time. That will make everything a little bit simpler. It'll make sure we save the correct things directly into Drive and don't lose them. Because as I mentioned, Colab, this section, anything outside of this folder is technically on the computer that we're renting, essentially, for this time period. And when we delete our runtime, we will actually lose access to anything inside of this folder. Now, there are other things you can do here, like say you want to make a copy and add additional notes to it. Say my notes aren't good enough, you want to add your own. You can use save a copy in Drive. That's going to duplicate this file, and then you can add your own notes. The way to add your own notes into anything is just double click onto this text cell, and then you'll see this is Markdown. You can just add code, you can make things bold, add italics, add links, etc. And then you can double click on the text section to close that cell. Likewise, with these cells, you can go ahead and just edit anything inside of them. I believe that's probably the main tools. Those are really the main tools I use. The other main tool I use is this runtime one. Now, when you are done using one of these notebooks, you definitely want to make sure you turn off your machine and delete your runtime. That is very important because especially if you're using something like one of the very, very expensive GPUs that runs like through 13 credits an hour, if you forget and leave it running, usually the machine will shut off after about 30 minutes, 45 minutes by itself. But there are sometimes moments where it just gets stuck and it stays open. So if you don't delete your runtime, you will actually continue to burn through credits. So at the end of every notebook session, whenever you know you're finished, there are two different places you can go to. So one is runtime. You can go to runtime, disconnect, and delete runtime. Or you can come over here and click on the little arrow here, and you can also go disconnect and delete runtime. This is very, very important that you do this because if you don't, again, you're going to start burning through credits. And you might wake up one morning and realize like, oh, I burned through 100 credits without realizing it because I left my machine running. I'll try to warn you at the end of every notebook session to make sure you turn it off, but in case I forget, make sure you do this. Now, you might also want to figure out how many credits you still have left. So the way to do that is to come over here and click on this little arrow and then look at View Resources. You'll see here it says that I'm connected to Colab Pro Plus, and it says I have available 490 compute units. And it's telling me right now, because I'm using that T4, I am using 1.96 credits per hour. Now again, it's because the T4 is a very low cost GPU, but it means that things will be much slower. So when I need to tell you to like upgrade to like a V100 or an A100, I will. But in a lot of cases, a T4 will probably be fine for what we're doing. Unless we're going to process like thousands upon thousands of video clips, in which case then we might want to upgrade just to make things run a little bit faster. But you'll see I have 490 credits because I'm on Pro Plus, and I'm saving them for this class essentially. Now, when this gets below a certain threshold, I think below 100 on Colab Pro Plus, you'll be allowed to purchase more credits. There is that sort of like you can pay per session credits. What is it called? The pay-as-you-go plan. But you don't really need to buy these until you've actually sort of like run low. Oh, actually, they changed this. They used to be that if you had Pro Plus, they wouldn't allow you to add additional credits until you were like at a certain threshold. Now it looks like you can just add them whenever, which is great. So again, if you do feel like you need to add more credits, you can. But knowing like this would mean I would need to spend a lot of hours to burn through these many credits. So that's probably the two most important things, just to keep an eye on your credit count. And then again, remember whenever you are done with your session to hit disconnect and delete runtime. This week we'll go through like 2 or 3 notebooks and you'll see how simple they are, and I'll give you all the instructions on how to use them. In which case, like we'll start to get in the habit of just using this more and more. You're new to Colab, the first couple times of running this is like always a little tricky. But going forward, like by week 4, 5, 6, 7, you'll be in the habit of like, okay, I know how to use this. Open, hit connect, add to like connect to Google Drive, like run process on my video, that sort of thing. So this is a little weird to start with. I am aware. I promise you it'll get easier as we go through it. And actually, I think as we go through the actual tutorials of each Notebook, you'll probably be like, why did Derek spend 30 minutes talking about how Colab works? I get it. It's easy enough to use. That's my hope, at least. We'll see how that goes. So this is just a basic intro to Colab. Again, now we're going to jump into actually starting to use Colab to cut up like a film trailer into clips.